So that's a good thing.
Yeah. I see JP and Colin from working in the Gulf of Mexico, and Helen, who I worked with in the North Sea a long time ago, and Dushan, who I'm working with now. So, hi JP. How's Houston?
Houston's good. I posted this on Yammer, so you might see some more people from BP.
Mr. Claypus, hey Colin.
And there's quite a few BP people. Lydia has just joined as well.
Okay, good. Well, I'll hopefully tell some familiar stories and some unfamiliar ones for people who are joining as well.
Okay then, so it is 5 o'clock and we are about to start. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the AFBE Leadership Talk Show. This is a leadership talk show that's hosted once every month, and we do aim to bring in special guests like the one that we have here with us today. Today we have a very, very special guest with us, Emeka Emembolu, who is the Senior Vice President of BP in the North Sea region. He is a hardworking man, clearly. He's a family man, a father of 4, so he definitely has a lot on his plate. And to see the amount of people who've signed up for this event is quite overwhelming. So thank you everyone for joining in. I hope you do enjoy today's session. Emeka, thank you for gracing us with your presence tonight.
Thank you. That is very kind of you to say that, Roy. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks to AFBE for everything that I know you are doing across the UK and in Scotland to support diversity, and just huge thanks for inviting me to come and do this.
Thank you. I think the pleasure is ours, and we hope that by the end of today, people would have learned a few things about leadership and have the will and the grace to carry on this leadership journey. So Emeka, as we jump into this talk, maybe let's start with something exciting. Tell us something that that is exciting about you that people don't know, something that we've probably either never heard of, or at least something exciting about you.
Something exciting. Well, I don't know about something exciting, but I can tell you something that's true, maybe, rather than exciting.
Okay.
Is all of my kids think I'm a really horrible geek. They think I'm the world's worst nerd. So we don't talk about that much outside of this family. A few people probably know this, people who know me, but I can get very enthusiastic about things from time to time. So, and it drives my kids crazy. So
should we expect any of your kids to be like you then?
To be like me?
Yes, as a technology enthusiast or a semi-geek or a geek.
Yeah. I've been working. This is one of my life objectives, is to get my kids in the same place. So I've got 4 kids. I've got 3 girls and a boy. My eldest girl, she and her team at school came second place in a cybersecurity competition. So I was really super proud of them for doing that. And my second daughter and we built a computer together, and she was very excited about doing that. So I'm getting my kids into all of this stuff. So yes, I'm not sure what my wife thinks of this, but I think she's okay. She's on board.
Yes. Oh, that's exciting. That's very good. So talking about you building a computer with your daughter, I want you to give us a brief history about yourself to sort of set the scene for today's topic.
Yeah, sure. And maybe before I go into it, I'll just say a bit about how I plan to do this. I'm just going to be open. I'm just going to put things out there. So given that this is an AFBE Scotland talk, I'm just going to start with the assumption that people on the call have some interest in diversity and inclusion, because that is something which the AFBE is looking to try and promote. And I'll also try and be quite specific with examples and experiences that I have. And I can't say that I do not. Well, in fact, I know for sure I don't have all the answers, but what I can tell you is what my experience has been on things. So that's what I'll talk about today. And maybe, so as you mentioned, Roy, so I'm currently the Senior Vice President for BP in the North Sea. I've worked for BP for 23 years, so done a variety of different roles. I'm starting in Aberdeen and now coming full circle back to Aberdeen, but worked a lot of different places in between. And I'm not going to make this a big BP advert, you know, but BP has been a really great company to work for and is a really great company. So so I won't apologize too much if that comes through.
That's all right.
If you see what I mean. But it's but I think part of, again, why I've gotten to where I've gotten to is because of the opportunities I've really had with the company. So to your question about my background, so I was born in Scotland, in Glasgow. So I was born in 1974. My mother is from Jamaica. My father is from Nigeria. I have two younger brothers. I'm the eldest of three. And kind of growing up, we lived in a number of different places, but mainly, so my mother being from Jamaica as well, she has a lot of her family are in the US. My mother has actually, so maybe this is an important or useful fact, is both my father and my mother only have sisters. So I don't have any, like, so uncles are all uncles who have married in. So, and most of my cousins are females. So there's a lot of women in our family. And for anyone who's either African or Jamaican, you know, like I'm dealing with a lot of really strong women all the way around. It would be the way I would describe it. And I think that's had a good influence on me growing up, would be what I would say. My aunts all, well, one of my aunts in particular, but my aunts, growing up, whenever we went kind of sideways on something, I'd always have one of my aunts who was going to give me a course correction. So that's kind of part of the growing up experience. But yeah, so we lived a number of different places. I went to university in Sheffield. I studied a degree in biochemical engineering at the University of Sheffield. I joined BP in 1998, working in Aberdeen, and as I said, worked a variety of different places. I worked at our Grangemouth refinery at BP. I worked at our Witch Farm onshore oil facility with BP. I've worked in Angola, or I've worked with the Angola team, traveling to Angola from Sunbury. I've worked in Alaska, Egypt, Houston, and when I was in Egypt, looking after activity we had in North Africa, Houston, and just before I came back to Aberdeen, I was looking after our subsurface activity in Houston. So that's some of the people on the call I got to work with. So that's kind of the potted, kind of abbreviated version of my background.
Okay, it's interesting to see that you've worked, you know, with BP across, I would say, across the globe in major regions of the world, which is quite good. So that means, you know, you've had a certain level of exposure, and as a testament to your leadership skills, I mean, you have ex-colleagues and people that you've worked with here. So that tells a lot about you. Now, you mentioned something about having aunties that set you straight when you grew up. I think most of us who have African descent do understand that, you know, when you have these aunties that, you know, always have slippers and something to set you straight when you start going sideways, let's put it that way. Part of this talk is about, you know, value and trust. And I think, you know, having spoken to you in the past, I've seen that you have very strong values, and, you know, you're a very strong family-oriented individual. But not just strong family values, you've also created yourself in such a way that you are valuable to whoever you work with. And I think that's a very key trait to have. But I would like us to talk through, you know, your values, basically. You know, what are the things that have, you know, set you apart you know, throughout your career? And we can even go as far back as, you know, your youth days. I believe you went to a Nigerian military school at some point where, you know, you probably had a take-home value from there as well. You know, if we can, you know, maybe start from there and just talk through, you know, this particular type of journey.
Yeah, so I'll say in terms of values for me, and so I was in the session I was in yesterday, the University of Aberdeen session. One of the questions somebody asked was, and you know, for this talk, I've been thinking about values. So I'll probably come back to these 5 things just as we go through this talk. But I'll say values I have. One is that I do try to work hard, but I would say I don't ask things of people that I don't think I would be. I don't like to ask people to do things I wouldn't be willing to do myself. So that would be one. I do think it's really important to be respectful to people. You know, I think a lot of different ways you can think about this, but to treat people the way they would like to be treated, or just, you know, yeah, just to get to know people and treat them with respect would be another value I would say I have.
Yeah, yeah.
A third value I'd say I have a way I try to operate is to be curious about things, just to learn and try and understand how things work, and try and follow up and do things to help them work better. A fourth thing I would say is if I need help, I'll ask. So I'm not at all too proud to ask for help if I need it, but also if I can help people, I do think it's important to do that as well. So that's something I try to do. And then the last one, which was a bit of advice somebody gave me, is I do try to be myself. So just a variety of times through my career, I've just had that reminder or advice to be myself. And probably this might be a good time to give an example of, yeah, to give an example of that. So, and this will jump around, but I'm going to forward to when I moved into my first leadership role. I remember being quite nervous about this at the time. And I was nervous about, I wasn't sure, I was nervous about whether I would be able to do as good of a job as I thought I could. And, you know, it's one of those things actually that before you get into a leadership role, it's something you want, but when you get it, it's kind of, at least I can't say for everybody, when I got my first leadership role, I remember thinking, man, okay, I've got this now, I better not mess it up. And so I called somebody, who used to, well, he was a boss of mine, but he did also mentor me. So I worked with him, and I gave him a call and asked for his advice. And I remember talking to him about a whole lot of things, but I asked for his advice. And what he said to me was, he said, Emeka, you got this opportunity, not mainly because of who you are, not because of you could be like this other person. I think I'd told him, you know, I've got this opportunity. There are these other people who I think would do an amazing job. You know, maybe I should try and do things like this person or that person. And he said, just be yourself. Just do it the way you, just try and be yourself, do your best. And he said, I think the way he put it to me is, if you fail, at least you'll know you did it your way. But if you succeed, that'll be the same. But he said, if you try to be somebody else, actually you will probably only fail because you're not that person. So just be yourself was the advice they gave me.
That's a very good advice, and it validates what we're trying to do at the leadership program. So far within the leadership program, we're creating training content that we can deliver at organizations and companies. And one critical thing that we realized was, you know, you need to be authentic in leadership, and you need to be yourself. Because far too often what you find is people try to be others. And what happens is, you know, they end up failing woefully because they're not themselves, they're not authentic, they can't communicate properly because they're trying to mimic others. you know, and that has a knock-on effect on their performance as well.
I think it can be good. It can be good for your health, or it can be good for your. It just can be. It can be good because, again, you don't know, or I don't know how somebody got to be who they are. But what I do know is there are people who do things in certain ways that you could really admire, or I admire.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you should learn from people you admire. I don't think you can't copy people exactly. You can't be exactly who somebody else is, but
Mm-hmm.
if somebody does something a way that you really admire, it's actually foolish not to learn from it, right? So that would be my, yeah. So without being other people, without trying to be other people, I think that's be yourself, I think actually is probably the most important thing. And I think especially for this group, and I think as we talk more and more about diversity, I think we just have to try and be ourselves, and hopefully the world will accept us for who we are, as opposed to maybe even who they want us to be.
Yeah. Okay. Talking about, let's take a memory lane back, you know, to you as a graduate, you know, looking for a job.
Okay.
I believe there's a very interesting story there that, you know, we can get the younger ones coming up to learn from. And that has to do with, you know, I want you to be, you know, talk us through, you know, the opportunities you had when you came out of university and what made you go with BP, because your whole career has been with BP. And just tell us why.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a good one. A good point. And actually, maybe something else I'll share. You know, I think it's good probably to share some things on turning points. I'll just share something really quick. So when I was at university, I went to university at Sheffield, and in my second year of university, my brother fell. So I've got two younger brothers. We're really we're super close. My youngest brother fell ill. He had a form of cancer called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I remember, you know, we didn't really know what exactly had happened. And I remember going home to visit to see how he was doing, and he was in the hospital. Then I went back to university. That was like at the beginning of my second year, and I just couldn't stop thinking about my brother, and I actually was thinking, what am I doing here when my brother, and I was like, I didn't know if he was going to get better or what was going to happen. So I just decided to take a year. I just decided to take a year out from university to be at home with my brother. And my mother had to take time off work as well. So she had to take time off work to look after him. So it was a really tough time for our family. You know, took time. I decided to get a job so I could help support my family at the time. And it was one of the first times, because I had normally been quite academic and focused on, like I'd been focused on university and focused on getting a degree all the way up until that point. But it turned out that was not the most important thing for me to worry about. So yeah, so I took time off. I took a year off, and he's better. My brother's doing super well. He's completely clear of cancer. He's been clear for a while. But that was kind of another early point that did help me think, just coming into work, that, you know, I go back to university and did my best and kind of did what I needed to graduate. But it was a big change in a perspective for me, that you have to also worry about other things as well, or some other things can from time to time be more important. Well, actually life is more important, was one of the things that I learned. But in terms of jobs, so why I chose to work for BP, I mentioned this again in the conversation yesterday. Reason number one was the people who I met at the interview, I really liked. I really got on with the people who I worked with, who I interviewed with, and we had an assessment center. And yeah, the people from BP, I applied to a number of different companies. I won't mention their names. Some of the companies, I was like, no, this one won't work out. There's this one company actually where I went through the interview and I think it was going well. And they asked me if I really wanted to work at that company. And I said, no, probably not. And so we kind of called the interview at that point. But with the BP folks I met, I liked the people. And the other was I thought with BP I'd get an opportunity to see a lot of different parts of the world. BP didn't offer the biggest salary of all the people I was interviewing with. The company who did offer the most, and this is just a small, maybe a funny little story, but the company offered me a job working in a nappy factory or a diaper factory in Manchester. And I did go and visit the factory, and I didn't have kids at this point, and I was like, yeah, I don't need this many nappies. Probably now I have 4 kids, I might have thought of it a bit differently, but at the time I was like, no, it's enough. Yeah. So I ended up anyway going to BP, really because I really liked the people, and they offered some great opportunities to travel and see a lot of different things.
I think what I was actually also trying to highlight there when we had the first chat was, the fact that you got offered financial reward, or a higher salary in about 2 to 3 companies, more than what BP had offered.
Absolutely.
I mean, even in today's terms, if you don't mind, I'm going to say it. I think the highest was about 35,000 at the time.
No, the highest one was 26,500.
To 26,500.
Going to go up to like 30,000 in a year was what they said, and BP was about 21.5 was what they offered.
And this was in the 90s.
Yeah, 1998.
Imagine that. So getting that type of salary at that time would have been, almost a jackpot, basically for anyone going into the industry. But there was something you said to me that kind of struck a nerve. You went with your instincts, and you went with the people that you felt you could work with.
Correct.
And most times when people are looking for a job, there's a lot of financial motivation. I mean, now people are more aware. I mean, the more experienced you are with working, the more you know what you don't want, and the sure you are with what you want. But as a graduate, trying to go into the industry, people just think, oh yeah, more money. More benefits.
I mean, for me, it wasn't, it was a tight time in terms of jobs, but it wasn't, I kind of had a number in mind of what I was hoping to get. And if I was going to get paid, so at the time, again, I was thinking if I got a job and I did some benchmarking, I'm an engineer, so I always do analysis. So I thought if I got a job that paid more than £19,000, then it was going to be up to other things. And so BP was like where I needed to, but the people made a difference.
So the people culture in BP is kind of very attractive for you. I noticed there's quite a few BP people here, so I'm sure they must be excited. When you went into BP, before you progressed as an engineer, I believe you had a certain support structure within BP, and that particular support structure influenced you getting a particular role which you were not interested in. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I can. So my very first boss at BP was a guy called Ian Kavanagh, and the reason I mention him is Ian has had a big influence on my career. He's a remarkable guy, and I don't want to mention too many names, but I have only good things to say about Ian, so I hope he doesn't mind. But he was my first boss, and he did give me some good opportunities. But I would say this one, the one that you're referring to, I got asked to apply to a role as an executive assistant. So I'd been working in the Angola team, and I had I'd like to, maybe after this, I'd like to share an example about something that happened when I was working in the Angola team that was, I'd say, a very important turning point or realization for me. But with this executive assistant role, I got asked to interview for the role, and I spoke to the person who would have been my boss. And when we talked about what it was going to be an executive assistant, I remember thinking, like, I'm an engineer. I've like trained as an engineer for, I went to university to train as an engineer. And this executive assistant role, I remember thinking it didn't sound like an engineering role at all. It sounded like I was going to be looking after this guy's, calendar, seeing who he was going to be talking to. And there was some part of my mind that was thinking, like, how does this relate to being an engineer? And so I called him up and I said to him, actually I didn't call him up, I sent him an email to say, thanks very much for the opportunity, but I've decided to do this other role. And then I got a call from Ian to tell me that was the wrong answer. So, and I was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, he said to me, he wasn't sure if I knew what this opportunity really was. And I could do engineering roles other times, but this was working at this role at this time with this guy was a unique opportunity and I shouldn't turn it down. So I did trust him. I decided to do it because he advised that I should do it. So I sent another email saying, oh yeah, okay, I've spoken to a few people and changed my mind. So, and I also thought this was not going to be a good way to start this new job with this guy, because I've, very senior guy, and I've told him I don't want to do this job. How's this going to go? But I have to say that was a huge, doing that role, that executive assistant role was a huge turning point. It was not at all what I thought it was going to be going in. I learned a lot about the company, a lot about how senior executives in the company worked and how they thought. And I got a lot of really great advice from the person I worked with. So that was really, so I think to your point, that was a good example actually of having somebody in your career, and this is maybe something for people to think about, and you can make this work, is to have somebody in your career who you trust that will really look out for your interests, that will really support you. I think, just again, for people working in whatever company you're working in, having that kind of support makes a difference.
How critical would you say having an understanding, because having worked as an executive assistant, you had the privilege of working with somebody who was within the management, an executive individual, and that exposed you a lot to processes, methods, and the business itself. How would you say that influenced you in your career?
Oh, a lot. I think, so I was working in the Angola business, and again, I got to, and I was working on this project for a new field that was going to be coming online. I'd been doing that role for 3 years before I got into this executive assistant role. And I would say with most of the things I do put myself into them 100%. So I was like 100% all in on this project. And to me, it was the most, I was focused on it. It was like the most important thing I felt I could be doing. Not long after I started working as the executive assistant, we had a conference, or I was in a conference, and in this 3-day conference, not once did anybody mention this project I was working on. And for me, this was like the most important thing, but nobody actually even said it once. So I was somewhere between irritated and annoyed. I just found that strange. So after the meeting, I said to my boss, I was like, so how come, like, the project I was working on, how come this never came up? I've been pouring my heart and soul into this. It never came up one day. And he said to me something like, he asked me how much it was producing, how much money was coming out of it, and it was not online yet. And he said, so no, it's not as important as you think, despite the fact you may have been working on it. And for me, it was just a bit of a change in perspective about, it just gave me a different view to what I had, which helped me see that there was, at least within my company, there was a more global view of things. It was important, but not in the way that I had thought about it.
It wasn't that very critical at the time. I would start taking 1 or 2 questions from the group as we go. So Isla Rob has said, BP are a good company to work for, but even they must have changed, improved over the years. Any example and what advice would you give to other companies to get the same amount of connection with their employees? I think this is a very important question, and this will be for to other companies.
This is advice to companies?
Yes, so I believe this is advice on how the companies can get to engage with their staff, with their employees, to have that level of connection and support.
Oh well, man, it's a very good question. It's a hard question, and I'm not sure I'm the best person to give advice to all all the companies in the world. But what I would say, I'll answer it a different way, is I think it's important for people to work for a company they can relate to, as opposed to maybe expecting the company to relate to them. That it's a different way, I put it a different way around. And it goes back to this thing about, I did choose to work with BP because of the people I was working with. And as I worked with the company for longer, I've met more and more people that I trust and respect and really like. And so that's almost tightened the bond between me and the company. So I think it's as much on our end as it is on the companies to make it work. There are some companies that I don't think I would want to work for, I don't think I could work for, and I feel convinced that no matter, and again, I know what those companies are, so but I don't want to mention the names. I'd say no matter what those companies do or try to do, I don't think I will ever get on in those places.
Okay, but Emeka, that advice stands, it's valid, but what happens when you don't have a choice? What happens when you're limited and you need a job, you've got a family to take care of, you've got needs, and maybe the only company you have is one that you probably wouldn't want to go into, but you've got no choice.
No, that's fair, Roy. I think maybe, and the way I'll answer that is, what happens if you're doing a job you don't want, or if you're if you don't have a choice? And I think the only thing I can say is it's hard to, you will probably not change your company. You may not be able to change things, but what you can change is maybe how you relate to the company, or how you might relate to the situation you're in, or how you deal with the situation you're in. So I'll give, again, I'm going to try as much as possible through this just to relate it to personal examples. So again, I think really highly of BP, but not all the jobs I've had at BP have been great all the time. So in my first job with BP, I was working offshore, and our boss on the platform we worked with was a pretty tough guy. And I remember I used to have to do this daily report for him. I used to have to do this daily report about what was going on the platform, and he just didn't like it. Basically, there was nothing, it didn't seem like anything I could do would make him happy with the work I was doing. And so at some point, so we worked this together for 2 weeks, and I didn't feel like I wasn't making any inroads with him at all. Things just didn't seem to be working. And I would say the last day of our 2 weeks together was probably just one of the worst. So, I went home, I had 2 weeks off to think about this whole situation. And I wasn't, as it came to time to go back offshore, I was thinking, man, I hope this guy's on a different shift, or I hope I could somehow avoid this whole situation. And unfortunately, I met him in the car park just before we were supposed to be going offshore. And when I met him, I remember saying hello to him, and he just walked off. And I knew he heard me, but he just walked off. I was like, man, there's going to be another long 2 weeks, was what I was thinking. So I got offshore, I thought about what I was going to do, and then I just decided, to hell with this, I'm gonna try something different. So I woke up quite early the next morning. So normally our shift started at 6. I woke up quite early. I wrote this report, and I said I was going to make it. I decided I was going to do the best report I could. I did this report. I took the report to him, and I took a red pen to him, and I told him I bet he wouldn't be able to find anything wrong with this report. And he lost it, and I was like, just if you find anything, mark it up, tell me what's wrong, and then, but I bet you're not going to find anything. He went through the report, kind of crossed out a whole bunch of things, and then I asked him how many marks he would give it out of 10, and he was like 0 straight, so 0 out of 10. So I was like, okay, we'll try again tomorrow. So this is what we did, literally, for like the whole 2 weeks. It was like, I'd get up super early, do this report, red pen, give it to him. And this is like, and I just in my mind, I was like, yeah, this, I'm going to make this thing work. And like, what do I have to lose? And, he's not going to fire me for trying to do the best job I can. So that's what we did. I'm going to say, so we went through that 2 weeks. I can't remember how exactly it went, but I did start again, maybe as high as 4 out of 10, which I felt pretty good about from time to time, coming from 0 and with this guy. The next trip, we did the same. My third trip with him together in this whole campaign, I went into his office, and that time he had like a red pen in his pocket. So I didn't even need to bring my own pen. So he kind of got the routine of what we were doing. And then actually things got a lot easier. We would have tough days every so often, but actually it wasn't so bad. And actually what I figured out was, you know, I figured out actually a way to work with him and to work with the situation. And then I do remember a bunch of time later, some people had an issue on the platform, and they asked me to go and talk to him about what was going on. And I asked them, why were they asking me? And they go, because he likes you, because he was the engineering manager, likes you. And I remember thinking, man, you guys don't know how I had to work this thing to get to this point. But it was at that point that I realized that actually I'd made the job, I'd gotten it to a place where it was better than it was. I'd kind of gotten it to a place where things were better. And I'm just, again, sharing this example of that did start out as a situation that I was not happy with. And I would, like, literally things happen where I just would rather not have been working with him, but I managed to work that one through with him. And eventually I got to the place where I was able to ask him, like, why did he have to be, you know, when he was that way with other people, actually built that relationship to the point where I would actually talk to him about why he was doing the things he was doing, to try to help make that situation so other people didn't have to go through the kind of thing I went through. Yeah. So I don't know if that helps, but
that's a very good point. So what advice, because you've dealt with a difficult boss, and I'm pretty sure there's a few people out there who have difficult bosses to deal with. What advice would you give to someone who has a difficult boss, who is probably working as hard as they can, you know, to please this, you know, this individual, but are not getting through?
Yeah, I think, well, two things is, one is, some of it is going to be, there's an element of perseverance that you're going to need to have, or determination, that if you can understand why they're difficult, but some people are just plain difficult. And for the people who are just plain difficult, if you can talk to them about it in the right way, it is worth figuring out if you can do that. It's worth trying to figure out if you can do that. And I have also had bosses who have been difficult, and I have had conversations with, and in some cases, in one case I know, the person didn't know that the way they were doing certain things was causing me the problems that it was causing. So sometimes it's ignorant, sometimes it's not. I think the only way I found that you can really tell the difference is to ask, but it does take it's not easy to do. If you can't do that directly with your boss, it's probably worth seeing if there's anybody else who may be able to help, or have those conversations with your boss that can help you. But I would say, I hope that most companies or most places people are working, there could be at least somebody who can help. But you have to, my main advice would be, just try not to suffer in silence, look for help, and try and get help.
Yeah, that's a very good advice. So if I have a difficult boss, reach out to them, ask the question. If you can't do it yourself, look for someone who probably can relate to them in a much better way. I've got a question here from Yinka. So how did you manage the transition from fully engineering role into leadership role? And this is a very important question, because, you know, one of the aims for the AFBE leadership program is to help, you know, people of color transition, you know, from senior technical roles, because they've either been there for decades, you know, help them transition into senior leadership role, or at least management level roles. That is one of the aims of this leadership program. So how did you manage that transition, and what advice can you give people who are in that particular space?
So Again, this is where this executive assistant role was quite a turning point for me, because there was something I did in that role that made a big difference. And then I started doing in many other roles. And I would say that actually made a big difference. And it's something I still practice today, but it's more difficult to do because of the size of the organization that I'm working in. But in my first leadership role, I was a team lead in Alaska. And actually going back to the executive assistant role, with that role, as I mentioned, I didn't really know what this job was about. So what I did was I spoke to all of the people who worked for my boss. There were about 8 of them. And I asked them a few questions. And one of the questions I asked was what I could do in this role that would make the place we worked in easier, or what would make it better. And these guys were all really senior guys. They were all like vice presidents who worked for this boss of mine. And they told me some amazing things. It was like a confession. They were telling me all these amazing things. And I think it was because I asked. And so when I went to my first leadership role, I actually did the same thing. I had a team of about 7 or 8 people, and I asked them the question about what would make the biggest difference to our team, to how we worked, to where did they think opportunities were. And I think by asking questions like that and really listening to people and trying to tell where good ideas came from, and what was a good idea, that actually just following up on good ideas that people in the team had is probably the most important thing that I would say that helped with that transition, because that was the most important thing that actually for me helped with that transition, which was to try to help the people in the team that I was working with.
So basically
it made it easy. It kind of almost like, this is going to sound weird, but it's like when you only worked in teams for people, they give you lists of things to do. What I kind of did was I got a list of things to do for my team. So that kind of helped make the transition easy.
I see how that works, because, if you're working with people, you want to understand what they're going through, and you want to help and make, the whole process as easy as possible. This fits in nicely to a question Cyril has just asked.
I'm sorry, Roy, before you go off that question, I'll just say my finding, and it again may not always work, is that in my first leadership role, and in first leadership roles, it is important to remember you are part of a team, and it's not all about you as the leader. And if the whole team does well, then that's best. But if you have to help the whole team succeed.
That's a very, very valid point. You are part of the team, whether you're a leader or not within that team. You are part of the team, and you see that's the title of this talk: teamwork as well. Now, if I jump into Cyril's question, I will paraphrase. He says, the challenge that he's faced is being able to communicate between teams. So an intercommunication, and there's a struggle there. He says, have you faced this before in leadership? And if so, how do you communicate? How do you overcome this challenge of having multiple teams and everyone's working parallel?
This is well, Cyril, it's good to hear you're having this problem, because I'm sure every company in the world has this problem all the time. And I don't know, well, in our company, there isn't a silver bullet apart from you just have to keep communicating. I don't think there's a silver bullet to this question. It's just, I'll say the truth of it is, I don't think it's ever going to be easy. There's always going to be a need to communicate and reinforce communication between teams. So this is one that it takes, again, perseverance. And obviously you want to try and simplify and use various channels of communication. I can't give you a silver bullet to this. Maybe if I was to say one thing you can try, and something I've often tried, is to keep your message simple. Keep what you're trying to communicate simple, because if you keep things simple and you get your point across, the likelihood of divergence is reduced. So hopefully that answers the question.
Hopefully. Another question Cyril has asked, and I will paraphrase because I want to put two things together. Integrity and trust. Those are two key important things in leadership. Now, how have you been tested? Has your integrity been tested in the line of leadership? Because you're dealing with multiple people, you're dealing with, numerous moving objects, if I may put it that way. And of course, the most difficult things the most difficult thing to handle in an organization is the people. Okay. How has your integrity been tested? And how have you built trust throughout the organization as well?
Okay, how's my integrity being tested? So actually, I think tests of integrity come again, I don't want to generalize to people, but I can just say for me personally, if I feel like something is happening or something is going on that is a deviation from my values. And so one of the hardest things that I've had to do more than once in BP is when we've gone through changes and when we've gone through staff reductions, and you have to make choices that are going to impact people's lives. So that is one of the toughest things that you do or you have to get into as a manager. Yeah. It is a fact that almost every company at some point will have to do this. And for me, the way I try to always approach this is to be honest with people, to tell people what I know and what I don't know, and to try and just treat everybody, regardless of how things are going to turn up, with respect and support until, just all the way through those processes. But that's one of that is a hard, from an integrity perspective, doing things that are going to impact people's lives, that is a difficult one. But I think the way I come to terms with that is to try to do it with the maximum possible respect I can all the way through the process. Because I know it's, as hard as it might seem for me doing it, it is a lot worse for the people who may be impacted. So that's one example I can give from a leadership perspective. I don't know if that resonates, or I don't know if that addresses the question.
Yeah, to an extent. So in leadership, you are pretty much aware of what's happening in the business, in the organization. Yeah?
Okay.
And there's always you always have to balance how much of information you give out at a certain time.
Okay, yeah.
And how much information you withhold. All right. At a certain time. And, far too often, sometimes when dealing with people, there can be some form of misunderstanding. Okay. Where people think, oh, he's withholding, because there's certain people.
No, good. I get this question. I'll tell you my approach, and it doesn't always work, but I'll tell you my approach is I try and bias towards being as open as I can. And the reason I do this is that we all work with a lot of smart people, and I think, one of the things I dislike is if somebody's bullshitting me. Like if a senior person tells me something and I know that that's like not right, I feel like that's a waste of my time. And so I also think that that's how other people might view things. So my approach, honestly, is I tell people what I know, and I tell people what I can't tell them, even if I may know, but I do try to be as open as I can, always. I do. It hasn't backfired yet completely. There have been a few instances where I've maybe said things that I shouldn't have said, but I think that's the best way to build trust with the people you work with, is to be direct. Okay.
I think that's a very good point.
There's a few people on the call who've worked with me, and so I think hopefully I'm not saying anything which they would disagree with, that as in terms of how, actually I don't feel like I can. The good thing about having people that I've worked with in the past on the call is hopefully they will appreciate this is how I try to work.
That's very good. I've got a question from Hamish here, and it has to do with, your experience with diversity and inclusion, certainly within your organization. What has been your experience within BP, and how do you think diversity, and some form of inclusion and equity can be accelerated throughout the industry, not just within BP?
Yeah, this is a good question. It's a tough question. So, what's been my experience? So, I'll tell you a funny story this is from 1999, and I thought about this recently. So when I joined BP, I worked at the Grangemouth refinery for a while back in 1999, and we were doing some diversity and inclusion stuff, and there was a chart they put up which was around racial diversity, and it was like a pie chart, and in the pie chart there was like one line, and somebody said to me, "Oh, I guess that's you." It was like just like a pie chart with just like one line, because it was like almost not enough numbers for it to be notable. And I was like, and I remember thinking, "Oh, I wish they never even put that chart up," because I was feeling quite self-conscious about what it was. And I would say since then, there have been a lot of, there are a lot more people of color, there are a lot more women in the industry, but I would say that there is still across the board, still a lot to do to actually advance people, to advance people through, to give people of different colors opportunities. There are not a lot of senior people. I actually got asked this question recently. There are not a lot of senior people of color who are doing the types of roles that I'm doing, for example, in the UK. So what can be done? I think more companies need to take it seriously, is what I would say. That's how to make that happen. I think BP as a company is trying to lead by example. We're not getting everything that we could right, but it's the company does have has made it a priority to do more in the area of diversity and inclusion. And I would say over the last few years, that is something which more and more companies are focusing on as a priority. But it is going to take time. It is going to take time to get it right. I think to Hamish's question about what can be done to accelerate it, actually a big thing is to discuss it, to discuss the issue and to put the issue on the agenda. And it's not comfortable to do that. It's not, but it's the right thing to do.
Well, certainly a lot of companies have, started the conversation of diversity, increasing that and inclusion within their companies, so I think it goes beyond just having the conversation. I gave a talk recently, and I used BP's action plan, as a model, because basically that was one of the very few models I could find, that companies can emulate. And it's very important that, companies become a bit more conscious. However, having said that,
Roy, I think you're absolutely right. BP does have a framework to help support actions that will improve diversity and equality and equity in the workplace. And I think, again, more companies doing that, and again, this is a framework we've just recently put in place. So we're in the early stages of trying to implement it, and it's going to take time. But I think we need to take the steps we need. That's a good first step, is that actually the company is showing some intent in this area.
So having said that, that's the company's responsibility, and individuals who are within the executive team. What advice would you give engineers who actually are looking? So they've gone through every form of engineering training, leadership training, MBAs, to better prepare themselves for executive roles. What advice would you give them?
I'm going to couple what the question you just said with there's a question a lady called Mary asked about what you look for in a mentor. I think one bit of advice I would give is to to try, I think it is helpful. So actually two things I would say is you have to do the best work you can always. And I think if, so the foundation of any progression I think anybody has is going to be the work that they do. But in addition to that, having people who will support you or having the right support structure is important. So I think finding a good mentor or mentors is important and will help. People in your company who understand how your company works and maybe can help guide you to make the right career choices, or even guide you to do in the ways you're doing some of the work you're doing to make it the best it can be. And if you find those mentors, and I think good mentors are people who you get along with, and you can build a trust with and know that they have your best interests at heart. I think if you can find those people, they will help give you advice on both how to do your job, but also how you can progress your career. And they may even give you active support in doing that.
Thank you very much, Emeka. For lack of time, we wouldn't be able to go through most of the questions that have been written in the chat group. But before we start rounding up, Emeka, overall, you have ascended to a very good place in leadership, a place of decision making within your organization. You've gone through the struggles of just being an engineer, and now you're not just an engineer, you're an executive engineer, if I may put it that way. What advice would you give to people who, are either just starting their careers, who are just getting into the system, who are just coming out of graduate school? They see you as a role model, they see you up there, and what they see is a role model. Of course, they might not be able to reach you, but what advice would you give to them on how they should carry their career progression going forward?
I think I actually would come back to the advice or the things I would say that I try, and I'm not saying I'm the model and everybody needs to do what they need to do, but I would come back to the things I said at the beginning, which are around, working hard, being respectful, being curious, getting engaged with your company and whatever your company is doing, and, looking for help and being yourself. I would, again, bring it back to those things. And if I almost take your question a different way, actually, if I was to say, one thing would I have said to myself when I was starting out with BP, I really would say just, jump in, be curious and be yourself.
Jump in, be curious, and be yourself. Thank you very much, Emeka.
So, and I know, Roy, we're at time, and there are a lot of questions. I know this, and given this is a Zoom call, I am happy to stay a bit longer and actually talk about a few people's questions, because there are some really good questions here that I think, well, people have taken the time to ask, and I feel like I owe them an answer.
Okay, so what will happen is, I think you're the first person that I've had on this show who has volunteered his time to stay longer and answer the questions. So that's a testament to a clear-cut example and testament to your leadership skills. You do what you say, which is very good. But just before people start leaving, I will just talk about AFBE, and then we can stay on and just wrap up with some of the questions that are here. So if this is your first time to this leadership show, you're welcome. We have the AFBE Leadership Talk Show every month. It's supposed to be the first Wednesday of every month, but of course I was dealing with a very high-profile individual. It was very tricky to get the right time, but eventually we were able to. Next talk we have will be next month. We'll be hosting Vanessa Abraham John. She is the Director of Global Diversity and Inclusion in Linde Group, which is a very big group in the US and also in the UK. And we'll be talking about authentic leadership in time of social change. So look out for the posts on our social media and Eventbrite. And also, for those of you who haven't had the opportunity of attending our AFBE Gala Night, it is coming, it is fast approaching, and tickets are, I heard 10% almost sold out. So we will, if you want to join, it's an opportunity to network, it's an opportunity to participate. We have quite a few sponsor companies who have bought tables, It's usually a night of fun and culture as well, with lots of events. So if you're interested, please visit the AFBE UK website, which my colleague will post on here, and you can sign up for the upcoming gala, which is next month actually. So get your tickets, guys. Thank you to everyone who's come and attended this event. I noticed we're still going to stay behind to talk a little bit more about some of the questions that have been raised, but in the event that you need to shoot off at 6 o'clock, thank you very much, and hopefully see you next time in our next event. I'd also like to thank my co-host Bumi, who has been so gracious in handling the questions as well, and most especially our special guest, the type you say an August visitor. You get once in a while. Emeka, thank you very much. I know we're going to stay on, but this is just for formality, just so that if people wanted to shoot off, then they can shoot off. But certainly, if you've asked a question and you want an answer, please stay on. We're going to go through the questions in the next few seconds. Thank you very much. So
thanks for everybody who has to leave, and appreciate people joining. And again, good to see some of my friends and colleagues on the call. And I know it's late, so some people may want to go. So I can talk through some of these questions.
Yes, please.
But I'll give like really quick answers, I think, or really quick thoughts.
Okay. Maybe we should start. So the last question was after Cyril, mentor. So we have a very interesting, question from Simon Jake. But I think basically what he's trying to say is, you've worked with one company. What would be your leadership experience, and how would you rate your leadership experience with another company?
Oh man, I couldn't answer, right? Because I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if you're trying to hire me. I'm not looking for a job at the moment, so thank you for the offer. But fine. I think I think good. I don't know. I'm sure you can always. Could I have been improved by joining another new company, learning a new culture? Yeah, moving to new places or learning new things will always. That's always going to be a good thing, right? So, but I've actually had a good run so far. So I'll take what I'm satisfied with what I've got.
So
but thanks for the offer, Simeon.
A question from Albert. He's got 2 boys. What tips and I think he's about to start discussing career options with his boys. So he's in a dilemma at the moment. So let's try and untangle this for him.
Maybe I'll just say I feel like Albert now is asking for, this is getting to parenting advice.
That's what it looks like.
And Mr. Albert, so I've got 4 kids, and it's like different things for all 4 of my kids. So, and I know everybody's kids are different and there are different dynamics. And my son is probably the most challenging of my 4 kids in terms of advice about what he should do. He likes to play Minecraft. And so, other things that aren't about playing Minecraft, he's less interested in. So I feel like this is getting to parenting advice. I don't know. What I could say, what I know has worked again with some of my kids is actually talking about the things they're interested in and trying to build from there. That's been where I've been most successful, but parenting advice is always, it's always a risky area to go into. So I'm not here because I'm parent of the year. Maybe I'll say, you might want to ask that person.
That's a good one. A question from Lydia. How do you get your team to deliver a difficult objective?
Miss Lydia, good to hear from you. So how do you get the team to deliver a difficult objective? I think really, so my perspective is about, I think it depends on what kind of difficulty and what level of difficulty. If it's, we had a project recently where I wasn't sure if what I was asking was even possible, but the way I tried to get the team to that place was to just ask them to have a go and think about how would they do this, almost, but give them the option that you need to make the situations so that it's okay if people fail, as long as they tried. That's how I try to do it. Is yeah, if things are really difficult, then there's a chance it's not going to work. But I think you have to make it so that the team feel it is safe for them to try their very best, even if they can't do it. That's how I've done it, or that's how I try to do it.
What if you're working in a very safety critical project?
Safety critical that's a good point. So safety critical, you cannot. So when it comes to safety, I think again with BP, safety is not really an option. So it always, if you're asking people to do something that is going to lead to a compromise on safety, well, I would not ask people to do something that's going to compromise on safety. Okay. So it's a good question. But that's the boundary condition. That you can, if it's a safety critical thing, yeah, you have to be safe. That's the priority. Well, and because the priority is you want everybody to go home at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
So you can't ask people to do things that will compromise that.
Okay. Mark Lynch says, do you have any comment on developing charisma, energy, and presence so you can be your best self as an aspirational leader?
I don't know. Well, do I have any comments? So I don't really like, well, this is going to sound strange, but I'm not a big speaker to big groups. It's not my favorite thing to do. And I find it a bit nerve-wracking to do, which I'm just going to say directly. I had a boss when I worked in Alaska, a lady called Janet Weiss, and I told her I didn't like speaking in big groups. And the next time we had a town hall, she pulled me in front of everybody and made me talk about something. And she just kept on doing that to me over and over again. And so I think it's almost, maybe the best way I would say is, it's just, I think if you practice things, then you can probably genuinely be yourself. Some people are naturally good at it. Some people love doing it. Some people need a lot of practice. Some people it takes time. But I think if you are yourself, then people will relate to that.
Okay.
If you can get to the place where you're comfortable being yourself, maybe.
So basically, it's the advice is be yourself. If you can develop the skills to have charisma, that's fine. But if not, authenticity, I think, is the key word here. Being yourself. Another question from Cyril. I like this, Cyril. Cyril, please, if you can you start joining the leadership talk shows? Because
I would like Cyril to come on.
You're engaging, so I like that.
Yeah. I would like Cyril to come on camera. I'd like to meet Cyril because he asks a lot of questions. So,
Cyril, if it's okay with you and you're not shy, this is an opportunity. If you can switch on your camera, that would be great. If he hasn't taken off. Anyway, while we're waiting, he says, following the passing of the pandemic, what are the key skills you think that a new normal leader should have?
Hi, Cyril.
Yes.
Good. Yeah, good. Well, thanks for all the questions. It's really great to hear from you.
Sorry to bombard you with the questions, but
no, thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So what is the new, okay. And some of the people I work with, I think right now would appreciate this, that in the pandemic, what I think has happened is that our home lives have really invaded our work lives quite a lot. So I think one of the key things is you just have to be understanding of the fact that people's lives and their home are kind of connected. So you have to try and support people to do what they need to do to live their life. Maybe I think that's just much more than we ever had to before, I would say, just because of what the pandemic has done to all of us. That's one thing that comes to mind, at least, or the top thing that comes to mind for me from that question.
Okay, that's good.
I don't know if that makes sense to you, Cyril.
Yeah, it certainly does make sense. I think a more higher consideration of having the work-life balance is now on the compass of many corporates. And I mean, I will grow as a leader, and I was just wondering what will be the new skills, you know, for this new normal environment of having to have work-life balance as a priority for management.
Okay.
So I think we've answered the question excellently. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, thank you, Cyril. Another one. So it's from Aled Katiki. Would you say your career progression within BP was predefined, or you took roles as they became available? What advice would you give on taking roles contrary to your background training?
Yeah. So yeah, nobody's career in BP is predefined, or I don't know if anybody's is. So definitely my career was, well, not predefined to the best of my knowledge. But I didn't take, well, I think I gave an example of I didn't take all the roles, or in fact, there was one I tried not to take, but I ended up taking, but I definitely did not take all the roles. I tried to aim for roles that I thought were interested or would give me the most opportunity to learn skills that I would need to be, to generally understand how our industry worked or how our company worked or how I could add value. I think, what advice would I give to taking roles contrary to your background training? I do think that it's helped me to always have a core of my skill set that I can take to every job I've worked. I know that there are some jobs, so in BP, I think I'd be really bad in our tax department, for example. I don't know anything about it. I don't think I would be the right person for a role in tax. You know, I do probably bias more to engineering or business value creation. So yeah, there's certain roles that I would say I wouldn't be the best person to do, and I'm not sure if I need to develop. So I think always try and know what you bring to the role would be my perspective, and that's a good guide.
So I guess the final word would be on that will be play to your strengths and, you know, understand what the deliverables are. If you can deliver them, then
yeah, leverage your strengths. I don't think it has to be only things you're good at, but it should be things where you can in some way make a difference.
Or add value.
Yeah.
There's a very good question here from Yemi. It says, do you ever have self-doubt, and how do you deal with it to recover your confidence?
Yeah. Do I ever have self-doubt? I feel like having self-doubt is one of my special skills all the time. all the time. And that's why, you know, this is why I said about asking for help, is the way I deal with it is I ask for help. So I do. Like, I operate on the basis that many of the things I'm trying to do could go wrong. So I try and ask for help and think about what I do to fix it. And, you know, so I think in terms of, and to your question, Yemi, about what do you do, how do you deal with it to recover your confidence? Again, literally, I think it helps to have someone or people you can talk to if and when things don't go wrong, go right, and they will, or things will go wrong. And if you have, so I talk to my wife about a lot of things without being necessarily specific about, I talk to her about some things in general terms. I speak to people at work. I speak to, so Lydia was on the call, and Lydia has given me a lot of advice in the past, and JP and Colin and Dushan, like a number of the people who are actually on the call here from BP. I have actually asked for their advice or perspective. And sometimes maybe they may not even have known I was doing that, but I do speak to people a lot about how things are going, whether we're doing the right thing. And sometimes if things didn't work, what could we have done differently, or how could we do it better next time? So I think you have to talk it through with people and try and do better, I think that's the way I've dealt with it. And not try and if you don't get something right, try not to let it take you down all the way.
I think the way you've answered it, I think it flows with your character. You know, you make it sound very easy, and I think it's because you make it easy. Because you try to create a certain type of culture within your team, but also I think, you know, even just from having multiple conversations with you, you know, you always seem to ask the right questions, or at least ask questions bordering, you know, whatever it is that you're looking at. And I think that's a very key take home for people who want to go into leadership. Now, if we look at next question from Aled, I will sort of merge it with what Abdulaziz has said, but it has to do with, what are the main hindrances to having people of color in key leadership roles? This particular question has been asked severally in different ways. Is it that the positions are not available? Is it that the people at the top don't want to be pushed out, so hence non-availability?
Yeah.
Or is it that the people who want to aspire to get into these positions, haven't proven themselves enough? Or is it that there's just this discrimination against them and not given the opportunity at all?
So a long time ago, I was working in a job, and I remember being involved in a selection discussion for new graduates coming into BP. And this person said, he was describing, so somebody had been in the selection discussion. This was like, I'm going to say, this is like 12 years ago this happened. And he said that he was talking about somebody who was one of the candidates who had applied for a role. And he was describing how he really liked this person for a variety of different reasons. And I remember thinking, and I said to him in the meeting, it sounds like you're describing yourself when you talk about this other person. And the reason I mention that example is I think one of the factors is that it can be comfortable to actually hire people who look like you, or to put people who look like you, or people who don't make you uncomfortable in certain roles. And so I think that is that. I couldn't say for sure if that is the main reason, because this is not, it's not an area I'm an expert in, but I can tell you what I've seen is sometimes people take the easy route, and the easy route is who looks like them. And I think that can be a challenge, but it's not a challenge that if you look different or if you are different, it's not really a challenge that is in your control to deal with. And I think this is where companies actually have to have frameworks like we've tried to in BP, and have systems like we've tried to, and that again, it is not, it's not foolproof by any means. And they're far from perfect, but I think companies have to have systems and ways of dealing with and combating discrimination or lack of diversity, because it's a sad fact of life that it's unlikely to happen just left to its own devices unless people mean to make a change. Yeah.
Are you still okay to carry on, or?
Yeah, maybe another 14 minutes, and then I have to go see to dinner with my kids.
Okay, so this is more of it's not a question, but more of an affirmation, and an attestation towards you. And this is from Jean Paul. I think we should mention this. He says, having worked for Emeka, I can definitively support your honesty and respect. A big part of your leadership is, your discussions where you would show up as a great listener and take away any blockers, we would have. Hope you can keep that going while you move up in your career. And I think that's very important. You're a listener, but also you try to solve issues for people. And I think that's a very great skill for any aspiring leader or any leader at all to have, because far too often, what I find is when you're at the top, when you're in an executive position, it can be quite lonely. So what happens is, you don't open up to people. You don't work with and this is definitely for different people. You don't open up enough to your team. You don't have this level of conversations. You don't even listen to them because you feel, your decision is the final. Of course, it's the final, but you don't take any learning points, or you don't take any direction from your team. And I think this is very important for people to learn going into any place of leadership. And John, thank you for that comment. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because
thank you, JP. That's very, very kind of you. Very kind of you to say, man. I appreciate it, and thank you.
Yeah. So Lucy.
Yeah, I think that's less of a question. I think.
Yeah, it's
It's a comment.
It's a comment. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were to offer one advice, so this is from Gregory. If you were to offer one advice to a technical person keen to progress their career and leadership, what soft skills should they develop? I think we've kind of touched on this already.
I would just say I'll just give a direct quick answer is just listen. Would be what I would say. That would be the most listen.
That's very good. I think we're coming towards the end, or is it that I'm far too behind?
I see some more of my buddies from work. So Mr. Martin Quantrill, if you're still there, good to see you, and Reed as well. It's been a long time. I worked with Reed a long time ago up in Alaska. So it was, yeah, another person who was great to work with.
So I have one of my team members here who is who has worked on a particular topic, which we have flagged within the leadership training, and it has to do with bodying up and calling out. So we believe that, you know, if you're within an organization, it's always good to have some form of body. So probably somebody who is almost either like a sponsor or someone who is maybe your peer but ahead of you, a team lead, a manager, whatever, you know, but somebody who you can body up, who will support when you're trying to pass a bill, pass whatever, you know, to go through for approval. And calling out, you know, which is if somebody was outrightly discriminatory towards you or said certain things that were derogatory, you know, how do you call them out? You know, we've had this issue of, you know, do you choosing your battles? Do you call them out in public, or like you said at the start, you know, have a conversation and ask them what the issue is?
Yeah, no, what I have generally practiced, especially more and more as I've gotten into it, I think it is situational. I think if you're in I sometimes find myself, if I'm in a situation where something is quite obvious that people are not doing the right thing, there's some situations where you have to call it out in public. So it is situational. There are others where I've maybe given people the benefit of the doubt but I've had to address this for both the person who may have been doing the offensive thing. I've spoken to them privately to ask if they know what they just did or if they're aware of the impact of what they did. And most of the times where I've seen that, they maybe hadn't been aware. And so then you kind of have to talk to them about what they can do to make the situation better. And whether that's kind of, again, for them acknowledging it publicly with the person or privately. So kind of giving that, kind of having those kind of conversations. But I do think that this, depending on the situation you're in, this notion of buddying up is a good one, because it always helps if you're going into a difficult situation if you have a friend or two with you. So I definitely, I think I really like the idea, and yeah, I think it's a good idea, and one which I think some of us have probably done unintentionally, but actually thinking about it intentionally. Yeah, I like it.
So when we were creating the leadership training program, which will be rolled out very soon, one of the things we realized is that some people have done it unintentionally, or you know, and have done it and haven't reflected, think back on what their action was.
Yeah.
But far too often you find that, you know, being conscious and being aware, you know, helps you to take the right decision on how to address certain situations. And
there are some situations where actually you have to addressing certain things in public. Actually, a lot of situations actually, because what you don't want to do is make almost a difficult, well, I don't know, something don't want to make a difficult situation worse. But if somebody has done something unintentionally, I don't see a huge amount of value in actually publicly making it almost almost doing to them intentionally what they did to somebody unintentionally. I think it's a two wrongs don't make a right situation.
You're right.
But but sometimes again, I think lots of people will acknowledge their mistakes publicly, and those are some of the best people. And if they can do that, it helps everybody learn. Yeah. So I can go through, I can talk, like, I guess Helen Corbett, good to see you. Good. It's been a long time. I've known Helen for a long time. So what's the most exciting thing about being the challenge of the energy transition and an engineer, and as an engineer and as VP North Sea? I guess the most exciting thing is actually there are a lot of different opportunities now than there ever used to be, and there are going to be even more going forward. So I think that's the most exciting thing. The most scary, or I'll say the most worrying thing, is that it is a change, and when things change, well, risk that not everybody can come along with the change, and that's what we need to try and manage. And there's this thing about the just transition and making sure that people who are working, for example, in offshore roles can move into other roles, or actually people across the energy industry can move into other roles over time. I think that's something that we need to work very hard at as an industry, to make sure people aren't left behind.
So this is I don't know if this is a comment from Mary. A take home for me is the way Emeka answers most questions with example. I found out this was what disqualified me for roles in major IOCs like BP and Shell. I don't know what to make of that question particularly, because
well, I don't know. I hope. I'll just say, Mary, I do hope that actually answering questions with examples wouldn't disqualify you from a role with BP. So that's disappointing to hear, and I'd love to hear more from you if you want to get in touch directly. But I feel like being specific with answers is better than, oh, Mary said she didn't do that during the interview. Well, I was just gonna say, I think being specific with your answers is better than if you're general, then yeah, it's better. So okay, thanks, Mary. Thanks for clarifying.
Okay.
There's a question from Nika. Do you want to take that?
So how do you know when it's not right for you or when to quit? Well, I don't know. I don't know the full answer to that, but the EA role, like I did for 2 years. So it was like a fixed term thing. And I think that was about the right time for me to get the most out of it. But there are some roles, like, maybe a PA role might be a longer range thing. And if somebody is trained and wants to be a PA, actually that can be a career in itself. But if that's not what you want to do long term, then I do think having conversations with, again, your boss or other people in your company to try to find a route out of it is the right thing to do. And if that doesn't work, and if that doesn't work and that you continue to be in that situation, then you may actually start finding yourself in a place where you need to look for roles outside of that company. If you find yourself stuck in the same thing in the same company for too long, but you have options to go somewhere else. That would be my thought to that question. I haven't been in the position where I've been stuck in a role for too long, but I also have tried to help people move, because I do know the benefits for people's development of changing and seeing different roles and different things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay then. So I think we've exhausted most of the questions. If we stay on, we'll keep answering questions.
That's okay. And I can hear in the background. My kids are starting to get ready.
Okay.
So, yeah.
They're starting to converge.
Yeah.
So I think we would leave the rest. I think, Emeka, you've done a very sterling job staying behind to answer all these questions. True testament to your leadership skills, and something that we will look to emulate as well. Thank you for your time, your knowledge, for sharing your experience. Very much appreciated within the leadership team here. And we would hope to have you back at some point. Certainly when we're launching the leadership training program, We would hope to get your feedback and also get your involvement and also get your support on the leadership training program, which will be launching very soon. Again, Emeka, thank you very much for your time and thank you for sharing with us. Very much appreciated.
No, and thank you everyone for just all the time, and actually all the friends who joined the call as well. It's been great to see. It's been great to get the support, and Roy, to you and Bumi as well for putting this on. And I'm going to do what I can to help. So thank you, and thank you everyone for your questions and for taking the time.
All right, thanks,
Thank
Emeka.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Emeka.
Thank you, Emeka. Thank you.